Chuck Freiberg, my friend, thank you for being on my podcast today. I really appreciate your presence. I appreciate your time. Um, I am really, really excited for us to get into some conversation today and, just talk and tell stories. So you, my friend, are the founder of a group called Battle Buddies USA on Facebook, whose primary mission is to veterans in the veteran community to help those folks either gain employment or be better or more fully employed. Am I right?
Yeah, there's the stated goal, and then there's the byproduct of the stated goal. So our primary mission, as far as our corporate appearance, I guess you could say, is to help veterans return to full employment. And there's a lot of byproducts of what happens when our peers are gainfully employed. Their sense of worth goes up significantly, their daily purpose, their emotional well-being is affected in so many aspects by having something to do every single day. So what I can say is we all know what happens, the elephant in the room. I'm not going to go into what it is, what happens when guys lose their purpose, because that's something that we don't talk about at Battle Buddies. It's kind of like rule number one of Fight Club. You don't talk about it, right? But it does exist.
Yeah.
So our goal is to focus on the positive aspect of what can happen, and all of the rest of the nonsense that is solved with the positive outcomes just kind of goes away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to me,
so a return to full employment for veterans, that's our focus. And there's a lot of other things that happen within the community. I have to say that what I've seen in the last year and a half since we brought this online, and I've got a big team that works behind me on all of this, so don't think this is a one-man band by any means. I've got an amazing team.
Yeah.
It's really weird going out in public and being recognized, which is kind of weird. I'm usually a behind the scenes kind of fella, but when I hear these stories of this has saved my life, this has changed my life, this has helped my marriage or my relationship, or I get along better with my kids now, and it's absolutely crazy what the byproduct has been, and to actually hear it from people in the public, of people I just don't know. It's probably the most fulfilling feeling that you could have in your entire life.
That's awesome. It really is, because it takes something that is much larger than we are and makes it very personal, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got this big group of people and this big community of people that there's a need there. And I love this about your group. It seems like whenever somebody brings in a group of even 10 or 15 or 20 people, there's a post the next day from you saying, hey, welcome to all these people. Welcome to Battle Buddies. Reach out if you need us. Let us help you. I really it's something that it's probably the one thing that drew me to reach out to you and say, I want to have this guy, and I want to try to extend his reach even to my minuscule audience to see it, because employment's a big deal, especially right now, right? COVID's going on. Lots and lots of people are looking for jobs, especially veterans, and you help facilitate that. What's your background, Chuck? What do you, other than Battle Buddies, what do you do for a living?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go way back. I grew up in Minnesota, in the middle of the state, central Minnesota. Just on free cheese kind of kid back in the day when I was a kid. And, I didn't have a trust fund waiting for me or college fund set aside, none of that stuff. So I needed a purpose. And this Army recruiter called me when I was going into my senior year in high school. And when you hear 3 hots and a cot in college funding, I mean, that sounds pretty good when you're 17 years old. So I invited this fellow over to my house, Sergeant Chamberlain. I have no idea what the dude's first name is anymore. It was 30 years ago. But, this really allowed me to get out of my small circle that I grew up in a town of 1,000 people and see the rest of the world. It was, to say it was a culture change and a culture shock is probably an understatement, since, you know, it's stereotypical Minnesota. I mean, you grow up, you hunt, you fish, you work hard, you try to pass high school, and you marry some girl that you went to high school with, right? That didn't seem like something that I necessarily wanted to do. So I joined the Army back in 90. I was an enlisted guy through 97. So typical, you know, straight out of high school, a few weeks after I turned 18, went to basic training. Saddam decided he was going to invade Kuwait, be a bad guy. So we went and made him not a bad guy not too long after that. You know, I really enjoyed my time. I was all over the country, you know, Cali and South Carolina.
What'd you do for the Army?
So my final job, I was actually an artillery meteorologist, which was pretty amazing.
Weatherman.
Yeah, weather data collector guy.
Weatherman plus. Let's put it that way. Weatherman plus.
Yeah. So that was my final MOS. I got hurt in one of these high speed, low drag, you know, you're 20 years old types of schools, and you know, kind of that was an eye opener. That was really the first time in my military career that I had failed at something, but I was actually medicaled out of the school. So it was like, I kind of went down a different path, and I told myself if I couldn't go and do this crazy school and put on a different color beret, I wasn't going to stay in the Army too long. So I wrote out my last few years as a meteorologist. I got to kind of take a step back and focus on not sleeping in mud every single day, which was pretty amazing, pretty awesome. So then I got out, and like all uneducated Army guys, I had a tough time finding a job that would be kind of one of these corporate types of jobs, because everybody only hired college graduates at the time. So I went down the path of being in sales for a really long time. And I think it was like 06 or 07, I decided to go back to school, and I got my undergrad and my MBA. And I've worked for some fancy corporations over the last several years.
So are you
of sales and in sales?
So are you employed outside of Battle Buddies right now, or is Battle Buddies your
So the ironic thing is, well, so I'll give you a little kind of go back about a year. So I worked for Accenture for a few years doing software delivery, and our group downsized. So as this was starting to happen, Battle Buddies started blowing up and going into really great places. So I thought to myself, well, I'll take this package that these guys are offering and then give myself a little bit of a buffer and start this up as a recruiting company. So we launched on January 1st of 2020, and we had some rock star months, I guess you could say, the first few months. And then the pandemic, I'm going to call it, hit America and literally sent all of our guys home that we had put into places throughout town. So we did really well all the way through the end of March, and then we went to zero. So
that's awful.
So yeah, so I managed to have a couple of small contracts and one that kept me going myself through August. And now I don't have the faith with what's going on with the political world that we can get this recruiting company back up and running. That's got to focus on veterans first. And, you know, this has had its inherent problems when the unemployment rate had a significant change due to COVID. Right. So yeah, when the unemployment rate was sub 4%, you know, we were sitting there in the mid threes here in Minnesota, and finding talent was something that was a big challenge for a lot of these places, and especially in the trades. So a lot of vets are actually amazing trades guys, because you can kind of be like, hey, here's a pen. I need you to fix this excavator today. And they'll figure out how to do it, right?
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. So, resource restrained guys are really good for trades. And once COVID hit, I mean, just to be frank with you, people seem to be hiring vets as a charitable event here a year ago this time. And now it's kind of like, well, we'll take on vets once we get some good people in place now, has tended to be the conversations that I've had over the last few months, which is very disheartening to me, because if these employers actually kind of backed up what they say that they're about in their public sphere, and hired our guys, they would see, exponential returns on their investment with the average veteran, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the veteran community, and I hope this doesn't, because part of what I do is in my sphere is I hate it when people say dysfunctional veteran, that these kind of negative stigmas about us where that, I'm broken, I'm dysfunctional, I'm abnormal in some way simply because I'm a veteran. And that, for me personally, is a stigma that I hate, because I'm not dysfunctional. And 99% of the veterans that I associate with are not dysfunctional. We're normal, contributing members of society for the most part. And yes, there are those in our community who do have legit issues, right? And we know this, and those people we try to help as best we can. But the vast majority of our community are people who are hardworking, dedicated, motivated, downright motivated, right? That just want to work hard.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you were an Army Ranger in the infantry, or if you were a water transportation person, that the mindset is typically consistent. And, I find it interesting you bring up the professional image aspect of the vet. And, this is something that I set out on my, as a major initiative when I first came up with this stuff in my head is, I don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the nonsense stuff that I see on Facebook, the videos, and
the videos, the
Drew,
memes, the band.
Yeah, Drew, whatever his name is, the guy from New York, and Matt Best, I think, is hysterical. I mean, there's these guys that have carved out this persona of,
they've got their niche.
Shooting guns, drinking whiskey, smacking hot chicks on the butt, growing your beard out, putting some good beard juice in there, or whatever, and it's kind of like, guys, that's cool. Thanks. You're all Hollywood. I get it. You've done well for yourself. You've made this image of, whatever. And to think that all of us have PTSD, we're angry. It's actually not, we're angry. What typically happens in the workplace is we've always, at a very young age, 17, 18, 19 years old, your neurology literally changes when you're a mission first guy.
Yeah.
So what happens is when your boss gives you a task that you need to do by the end of the day or the end of the week or whatever, you understand that you need to get from A to Z in your time frame, and it's mission first. You don't sit there and take an hour and a half lunch break. You don't sit there and go on a smoke break. You don't, sit around and think about, what's the best way that we should plan this. You get 80% planned out immediately, and then you figure out the other 20%, and you just make shit happen, right?
Absolutely.
And so what happens is that we become really passionate about accomplishing our missions. And that being said, if you want to look at the civilian world, they don't understand that as passion. They connect that back to these angry dudes from dysfunctionalveterans.com or DV or whatever this other stuff is. And they're like, oh my goodness, I see these intense dudes, that are, chain smoking all day, shooting guns. They're there's kind of angry like this, and it's actually not anger, it's passion. So a
Yeah.
lot of people really misunderstood passion is a positive driving force where anger is destruction. So, when you got guys that have, been destructive for a job for 20 years now, we're going on 20 in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
Your simple mind doesn't really know how to differentiate that stuff. So getting back to what the original, point was before I started pivoting all over the place on you.
Happy to hear
Professional image is one of those things that's been extremely important for us at Battle Buddies to show that, hey, you know what? There are guys that in the trades, they're highly skilled, they're very efficient, and they're great employees because they show up on time. They do what you told them to do for the day, and then they go home to their family.
Yeah.
You've got guys that are highly educated and they've got a lot of great experience. They've actually have leadership abilities instead of managerial responsibilities, and they know how to get things done in the most intense, crazy circumstances ever without any resources, and they get it done safely.
Yeah.
What type of employer wouldn't want to have someone who gets stuff done on time, on budget, safely?
That should be all of them.
Exactly, it should be.
all
But
of
they
them.
don't understand that's actually bring these types of skills inherently to the table. And
So
go ahead.
So here's a question for you then. In your experience now with Battle Buddies and trying to find people gainful employment, are you seeing more people entering the trades versus entering the office environment?
So both.
Okay.
So I think it's a generational thing. So I'm 48 years old. I graduated in 1990, and the idea back then was, if you don't go to college, you're an idiot. You're dirty. You're gonna get a dirty job like Mike Rowe, right? You're gonna be cleaning the sewers here, and you're gonna be making $3.25 an hour or something like that. And so you have to go to college. What's that?
Back when dirt was new, $3.25.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So when I look at the guys that are transitioning out now versus in 97 when I got out, they seem to be more welcomed into the trades than in the late 90s. The mindset over in Europe is your guy who does the HVAC in the hospital is just as critical as a surgeon who's doing the surgery, because without the HVAC, you can't get the surgery done, right?
That analogy hits really close to home. I'm an ER nurse by training. I work in a hospital. I know just how important that line is.
Yep, exactly. So, it's like when I have conversations with different guys in Battle Buddies, they'll be like, "Oh, I don't have a purpose. I feel insignificant with what I do now at my current job," and blah blah blah. And it's like, what's your greater good that you're actually serving now? It's just like, I just put new spark plugs in my truck here a couple of weeks ago, and if one of those plugs is bad, the whole thing runs like shit.
Right.
And it's a $5 part, right? So, even the most insignificant piece within this machine can have an actual, desired outcome or a negative outcome. So every single person has a purpose, or they just wouldn't be employed. That's where this whole essential, non-essential bullshit that the media put out here, 9 months back really drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the guys on the page, I actually saw that this became a thing, and it affected their mind.
Yep.
And it hit too close to home for me with a couple of my friends over the last 8 months. Way too close to home.
Yeah.
And not going to get into those outcomes, but it's actually frightening what happened. So, every single person.
This whole labels thing that we put on people, and it kind of draws back to our dysfunctional veteran conversation just a moment ago. For folks that are employed, their job is essential to them. That's how they pay their bills. That's how they put food on the table. That's how they keep the lights and heat on in their house. So for some government arbitrarily to say you're essential and you're non-essential. Well, I am essential because I've got to eat too.
It's a constitutional basic, the pursuit of life, liberty. There's the Constitution was written in the spirit of freedom, and for anybody to go and say that to take that away from you, I don't care if you're peddling hot dogs on the street outside of my house, you're essential to someone. You probably got a couple of kids that you help them brush their teeth when they're little guys, right? That depend on you bringing home $20 a day or whatever it happens to be when you're all said and done.
Yep.
So every single person is critical to the mission. So for all of the people watching this, there's a really great thing that puts this in perspective. So there's this economist, he's been dead for a while now. His name is Milton Friedman, and it's called The Pencil. Every single person should listen to that, because something as simple as this, and this is a pen, it's an upgrade from a pencil, right? I don't have to sharpen it. But every component that goes into this, and every person who touches the person that helps get this to my desk here so I can function, is critical to me being able to do my job. So that's why every single person that is employed or is trying to find employment right now is critical to the greater good of society. Every single person.
Yeah.
And and that's one of those things that's driving me kind of crazy right now, is we've got a lot of people that think that people are just at home sitting on their asses collecting unemployment or a paycheck or whatever on the government, and they don't want to work. That couldn't be any further from the truth, except for my ex-wife. Just had to take a jab because I could.
You're allowed.
I can't help myself every now and then. You can edit that part out if you want.
Nope, it all goes in, friend.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is we will recover. Everybody will have their feet back under them. This unemployment situation, the V is crazy. Hopefully nothing happens come January 20th or whatever it is, when the inauguration is supposed to happen, and either Trump 2.0 or Biden 1.0, or I don't know what you call Biden, but
yeah.
The thing is that this COVID is really messed up a lot of stuff for a lot of great people. It's unfortunate. Yeah. We are getting through it. I've seen it hit the veteran community especially hard, which is really sad to see. Since if you would ask me this 12 months ago, I'd be like, my goodness, you're going to see every veteran that buys into the Battle Buddy stuff making 6-figure jobs. And you couldn't have convinced me otherwise.
Yeah. And at the rate that you were growing the page, and let's be clear, I have no access to your internals. I don't see any of that. I am a independent third party that just sees a Facebook page, and I see the growth there, and I see the camaraderie there, and there's something special that's going on with what you're putting out. That's really important, and there's a large group of us now that see the importance there and want to be a part of that and do what we can to help.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. We've actually watched the growth of the page drop significantly with COVID, which is the opposite of what you think would be happening.
Yeah, that seems counterintuitive.
It's like, oh, hey, the unemployment rate 22.5% right now. Let's not look and find jobs. What would help us as veterans find jobs, And it's like, so, we took off like a rocket. Almost straight line growth up to 48,000 people. And the last probably 7 months, I bet you there were days where I was literally approving over 500 people on the page that would join the page itself in a day. And, that was pre-COVID. So now COVID hit. And it's like, geez, if we had 100 in a week, that's doing pretty good. And we're not about the numbers. Right. We're about the members.
Right.
I don't give a shit if this thing doesn't grow any further than what it is right now, because I know that we're helping 48,000 people. that's all that really matters to me.
Can
The
I help?
part, yeah, exactly. And so the part for me is, it's like, why aren't we helping our brothers and sisters? You know, take 2 minutes, invite 5 people today, whether they're vets or they're really big vet fans, because, I tell you what, the civilian people that come on the page, they're game changers for our guys, because they give them a look behind the curtain as to how to actually find employment. And
So,
so this
so
this is, everybody is essential.
yeah.
Everybody.
So something I really like about what you've kind of made it cool again or popular again is, I'm still a relatively young man. I'm 37, right? But I do remember a time as a teenager where I could walk down to the local corner gas station, talk to the manager face to face, and say, I need a job. Can I clean your shelves?
Mm-hmm.
And they would make that happen for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, and don't get me wrong, like progress is good, technology is great. We have all of this stuff at our fingertips that can help us be better and do better, right? But the age of us being able to say, I know a guy who knows a guy that needs a guy, it has almost disappeared, right? Because we've got online applications and online job searches. And I remember one of my very first jobs, I spent several weeks pounding the pavement, walking business to business to business with a resume in hand, trying to ask for managers or owners or whoever and say, hey, I need a job. If you've got a job, I want it. And I don't care what it is. One of my kind of cute taglines that I use with folks in my community when they say, well, they don't have a job in my field, right? Um, I have a little bit of outreach with college age kids, and they tell me, they say, Sebastian, I, I'm going into engineering, and there's no engineering jobs. One, yes, there are. You've got to find it. You've got to weigh to yourself, what do you want to do here? Do you want to move from where you live now across the country to take this job that you trained for? Or do you want to stay where you're at right now and sit and rotate? Right. The other part is that I see a lot of is folks that say, well, I'm an engineer. I have this training to be an engineer. Why should I go bag groceries at the grocery store? It's beneath me. And I hate that, and I want to smack the taste out of people's mouth that say that, because no job really is beneath anybody. Because if you're trying to keep the lights on and you're trying to put food on your table for you or your family, really and truly, you should be able to go and clean toilets with your tongue to make that happen. And that's my personal tagline that I use with people. Like, go clean a toilet, dude. Like, there are jobs and there are monies to be made if you want to work hard.
Yeah, there's, not all situations are the same either with
Of
that kind of
course.
stuff.
Of
So,
course.
I'll get guys that are getting out of the military that are 06s and 7s, and we'll have conversations. And, there's a difference when you've got a guy who's accustomed to making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, in this, base commander fella, or,
So
adjutant
let's
general.
clarify quickly. 06 and 07. 06 would be full colonel for Army and Marines and Air Force, a bird colonel, or a captain in the Navy, and 07 would be a one-star general or a rear admiral, respectively.
Yeah. So, I'll get these guys that are in a different financial position where they can weather this storm for a significant amount of time. And, you know, they have to be really careful when it comes to their, if you get a one-star general driving Uber because
Oof,
he,
they don't put flags on that
needs,
one for him.
Yeah, so it's going to kind of raise a stink eye as to from a lot of people, right? As to why are you driving Uber? I mean,
Right.
it's a conversation to be had, right?
Right.
So, if you go from college kid to trained engineer, as you said, to Uber driver to, being an assistant manager at a Bath and Body Works or something like that, nobody's going to think twice about it. If you're a 55-year-old chief marketing officer, and all of a sudden you go and you work Best Buy, picking orders in the warehouse,
Something has gone terribly wrong for
that's
you.
well, not it gets confusing for people. So, we got to be careful when we kind of use a broad-based, this is where HR is broke. If you ask me that, I mean, we could do a 5-hour interview on HR is broke if you want, and how to overcome HR and work with HR and the things that HR should. I mean, it's a really ugly mess, but yeah. So no, there comes a point where in your life you may just have to, take that private mindset that you had a long time ago and go clean the toilets or mow grass or
Right.
go do some painting with your buddies or whatever. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've I've done a lot of work in the evenings with buddies of mine in the past. When I've been working 60, 70 hours a week, they're like, "Hey dude, I got to move some heavy shit. Can you
I need a
come help
hand.
me get a?" And it's like, "Oh, seriously, a water heater from how many stories down?" Okay. All right, I'll help you, So
Been there and done that, friend.
yeah, right.
So are you seeing, and you mentioned kind of like, the full colonel or the general that gets out and ends up having to drive Uber, are you seeing a lot of folks that are switching careers now or making drastic career changes right now?
So for the last probably 15 years or so, we've transitioned from, my grandpa was a union truck driver. Okay. He worked for one company his whole life, got the watch and the little clock that had the little spinner thing on the bottom and all that stuff. Right. And to have a static employer for 40, 50 years is unheard of now. And we've
Yeah.
transitioned more into a gig style economy where if you look on the page, Battle Buddies, you see a lot of people, they might be selling oils or Plexus or whatever that stuff
Mm-hmm.
is, or one of these multi-level marketing things. So to have their little side hustle going on, maybe a photography business or something like that, web development. And then you'll see that these guys will have some other job. So they might be a cashier at Target, or they might be a marketing officer at Target, but they still like that side gig, that hustle that's going on the side. There's a lot of advantages for that, right? So if your employer tells you to pound pavement, you've got that. From an IRS perspective, we won't jump into all that stuff, but it gives you the ability to operate your passion on the side and have some tax advantages, which are very beneficial for you, because you never know, you might have that $1 million idea down in the basement. So
Right.
the transition over the last 15 years tends to be one that, at least that I've seen, is most people have their 9 to 5er, and then they have a side hustle gig that they're trying to make go full time, or this is what gives them. I mean, I got a buddy that donates plasma like crazy. I mean, I'm not kidding. He's got a hole in his arm that's the size of Texas.
Yep, I've got
And
that.
oh, I hate needles. I hate them. Um, better for you than me. Someone's got to give plasma, right? But that's how
Right.
he puts all his Harley parts on his bike.
Yeah.
So, it's like
And
the
right
the
now,
idea the idea of having a job for 20 years for, our generation. I'm gonna loop you into me now since we're a decade apart. That's kind of a fantasy at this point, because a lot of times these companies can't keep up with your personal and professional growth.
Right.
And it kind of says something about you that you're not marketable enough to go somewhere else, or you're too afraid to take on another challenge somewhere. At least that's how I've seen that throughout my own personal career. And it's like, promote me, or, I hate to pull this on you, but I might have to go somewhere else and showcase what I can do. And I don't want it to be a competitor. So, yeah, that's what I've seen. I mean, maybe we go back to, working down at the Ford Ranger plant like it used to be here across the river, and grandpa gets you a job and you work with your dad too, and everybody's got their pension and then the same union hall. I don't know.
I grew up in West Virginia.
Okay.
And I didn't grow up necessarily in coal country, but I had friends in college who did, and they would tell these stories where, my granddad worked in the mine and dad worked in the mine, and dad talked to the foreman and the foreman got me on. And then, dad worked for them for 38 years and I'm working for them now for 29 years. And it, like, holy Moses, we don't, like you're saying, we don't see that anymore. And kind of the point of that I made is that, the whole, I know a guy who knows a guy who needs a guy, almost doesn't exist in our culture anymore. And if it does, it's incredibly difficult to make happen. And they still point you back to the HR office or to the website to fill out your application. Like, the days that I'll go out and say this, the days of me being able to walk into a store and talk to a manager and say, I need a job, and then saying, you have a job, are gone.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a story out of my own life with this. So I have a 16-year-old son, and last summer of 19, he thought he was going to take the summer off. Right. And so I let him know that if he was going to drive my car, that he's going to have a pretty decent amount of money saved up. He kind of looked at me weird, but he knows I don't mix words, so he didn't question it, right? And so he didn't really understand what he needed to do. He's 15, right? I mean, that's understandable. And as a good parent, you do what you can to kind of educate your kid,
right?
At least to what you think works out. And I'm like, dude, you've been to a bunch of Battle Buddies meetings with me. Just do what I've been preaching to these guys. And he was like, how am I going to get? I'm like, you got a bike in the basement, dude. Pedal your ass, go.
Go.
So he went 3 days straight. He hit over 80 businesses, filled out applications to most on the spot, and then came home. Like Home Depot and Target and a few of the bigger corporations require a tracking permit system entry, right?
Yeah.
So, and on day 3, we walked into Chick-fil-A of all places after, and I was like, these kids look like they're 10 years old in here, and I was like, what's your hiring age? And I think they said 13 or 14. I'm like, dude, grab an app, right? Yep. And he filled it out, and he went up to the manager, and she's like, we have open interviews in the morning. If you want to show up, and you have a good chance of starting here. And that's what he did in the next morning, right? And he started. So, it is possible. It requires a different level of commitment than, he's a teenager. He doesn't understand no really all that well yet, right? He just kept on going. I mean, don't get me wrong. He went through the typical emotions of,
rejection.
This one said no, this one said no, this one said no. But he kept on going because he knows that's what he needed to do. So, from an HR perspective, it makes sense that the companies want to make sure that there's no preferential treatment. They want to make sure that there's no discriminatory hiring practices happening, all of those things, so I'll give you a common misconception is that, company X is a veteran friendly company. We hire vets, right? Everybody does, right?
Everybody says it.
Everybody does. So as a vet, you're like, okay, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to show them my VFW card here. That means I've been to war, right? They're going to hire me on the spot. I'm just going to click that checkbox there. I'm a vet. Take my entitlement. Actually, the opposite happens in these HR systems. So that gender, that ethnicity, that veteran status, all of those things on that page that's generally separate from the rest of the application process is actually sent in blindly to the government because they want to make sure that you're not hiring based on or taking applications based on some sort of preference or something exclusionary. So, you may have somebody who, somebody had a bad thing with their dad who was a Vietnam vet who beat up everybody in the neighborhood.
Right.
And they might think, oh my goodness, all vets are terrible, right?
Right.
Or their uncle could be a Medal of Honor winner and they're like, I love all vets, and just blindly hire vets.
Right.
So it can happen on both ends of the spectrum. So you're still required to qualify under all of the preferences and the requirements and all of that stuff of the HR posting. But that's one of the things that is required in HR, and it makes sense for these big companies because they are accountable to the government, especially if they're a contractor, a federal contractor,
Right.
that they have to hit certain requirements. So that's why this happens. But that doesn't mean that's how you have to go about. So when you're talking about, hey, my great uncle works over there, and I got 3 cousins that are over there, that doesn't mean don't go and bug your cousins the next time you get together on Thanksgiving. You absolutely should be talking to them about how do I get into, the place where you're at. You always talk great about it, and your dad works there. It makes sense, and you have to work with HR. If you're going to go on and just blindly apply for jobs, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It's like I went pheasant hunting this weekend at a game farm. Okay. We bought 40 birds. We got 37 of them. We still had to take the dogs and walk every single row and let those things work like crazy. And then of course I get to shoot 3/4 of stuff by myself because no one else is a shooter out there, right? Let me pat my back on that one. But it's the same thing. You just don't sit on the edge of the field and in your zero grav chair and shoot your shotgun from 500 yards away and drop pheasants. I mean, it's the same type of thing applying for a job. You got to go in, you got to dig around, you got to hunt around, you got to be persistent, you got to kick up every single little brush that's sitting there. I walked out wet, muddy, cold. I mean, I wasn't happy, but you know what? I got a fridge that's got some amazing pheasant in it that's being consumed on Thanksgiving.
And let me clarify my stance here. I am not saying that people shouldn't go out and kick the bushes. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go out and knock on the doors and try and get FaceTime with people. Absolutely. Because that works, and we know it works because we've been there and we've done that, and we've told people to do that, and we've seen that work. The point that I attempted to make was, because of HR and because of online hiring and online tracking and all of this other mumbo jumbo, that's my personal opinion. It makes it that much more difficult for people to go out and say, I want a job. You have a job. I need a job. Give me a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
and the time has changed. The time has changed, and that is the way of the world now.
Yeah. So like this summer when I was doing all of this recruiting, I was doing a contract for a pretty big high-tech company out in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And these guys hit me up with the craziest requirements that you could ever imagine. I mean, it's like, I'll be right back. I'm going to go find a rainbow striped Sasquatch. I'll have better luck with that,
That poops out rainbows.
Hopefully he's qualified on the rodeo at the off the unicorns, right? I mean, it's like, seriously,
right.
You want me to find what here, fella? And, I'm sitting there tasked with these crazy requirements. I mean, insane requirements. And it's like, that guy doesn't exist. That woman doesn't exist. That level of nerd, that you want somebody with 50 years of experience, but they need to be fresh out of college.
Yeah.
Explain this to me. And then, they want this. They have preferences on the diversity look. Okay.
Right.
Just leave it at that. So I didn't know this about the diversity stuff, but I brought them 5 Sasquatches and I lassoed them all. They were all in a row, packaged up beautifully. They got off the cattle trailer out front, cattle truck, cattle car. Were you in the Army? I never asked.
In the Army.
Okay. I heard they got rid of the cattle cars at basic training back in the day.
And I've heard that rumor as well. And I know that they've changed the initial.
Yeah, the shark attack.
Yeah.
Stuff, right? So, I had them up, just politely coming off the cattle trailer one at a time. It was beautiful. And, all of a sudden they throw this curveball at me. They're like, yeah, we need more diversity than that. I'm like, what? You what? And so it was back to the drawing board for me. And, I think it's shameful personally that we've gotten away from let's hire the best qualified candidate versus how do they cover the bingo card and things that don't necessarily equate
productivity
to getting the job done better. Because I brought you qualified people, humans. You wanted qualified humans. And I don't, I think that I'm actually hurting these 5 guys over here, or 5 humans, I should say, because you're being kind of irrational. And there's this utopian idea within HR that you can do stuff that is impossible because you dream it up doesn't necessarily mean you can do it. I mean, everybody's telling you, if you want to be a president of the United States, you can be that. Well, there's been 45 and a half now, right? All time in 250 years. So let's keep our expectations reasonable.
Yeah.
It's like the spark plug, right? Just like solving world hunger, just make someone a sandwich and then show them how to make a sandwich. And then maybe you could bring them out deer hunting and they can, get some protein for themselves or who knows what, right? I mean, one thing at a time though. So, it's like HR's very challenged. HR is usually the Karen who knew how to put in used to be able to get on to Craigslist and put up a job posting. And, then she, all of a sudden gets a little more courageous with her brazen approach to posting stuff. And, well, let's, even though it's a plumber, I want this guy to have a PhD because, all of these guys have been through the same trade school, but I can get picky now. And it's like you ever gone on like Chevy.com and built a Corvette for yourself?
No.
So I've done it. You get them up to $100,000, right?
Oh, easy.
You think I'm going to go to the lot though and pay for every month or write a check for $100,000 for something that I'm going to put 2,000 miles a year on? No, not happening. So HR kind of takes that approach of, well, I could put the big engine in there, get the fancy tires, get the upgraded brake system, get, a convertible even though the only thing I can afford is an Aveo or whatever the cheapy car is, right?
Chevy Spark.
And they become, it's, it's like, hey, that Sebastian fellow walked in here and he presented himself nice. I think he had a good vibe coming off of him. I think the guys in the back in the warehouse or the guys on the sales team would really appreciate his vibe. Let's bring him in and talk to him, Yeah. So that disconnect of the intangibles with the system that we're operating in has been minimized because HR is protecting their job by making themselves relevant.
Yeah. Chuck, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm really appreciative. We're almost right at an hour. Thank you so much for sharing your time and some insight and good conversation. Any websites that you run other than the Battle Buddies USA Facebook page? Anything else you want to promote right here?
So the best place obviously is on Facebook. There's 50,000 people on there that need help or are willing to help. It's Battle Buddies USA. I do operate, our nonprofit is in process as we speak. I turn in the final paperwork again. Hopefully we get granted 501c3 status here pretty quick. So when that happens, we're actually going to be able to take that funding that comes in and do direct support for vets. And we're going to go through a process of selecting certain people to help every single month. So depending on the budget, we'll,
Right.
kind of dictate how many professionals we can hire. So, look for the donate button coming soon. $1 here and there for these vets may make a big difference, but I'm going to, of course, hit my corporate buddies up and guilt them like crazy. Hey, you guys hire vets. I can get you some really good guys into your interviewing process through Battle Buddies. It's going to cost you though. I'll hold them hostage somehow. So look for that. So battlebuddies.usa.com and .org. So the .org is geared towards the foundation side, and the .com side is geared towards the recruiting side. So I do have 5 very, very capable contractors that are 1099 people. They've got a lot of experience. We know how to do staff augmentation, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. So all of the services that you could be looking for from a recruiting perspective, we do have the ability to offer them. And I've got some amazing partners. So I'm not really that guy. I do know what I'm doing, but compared to a couple of guys that I've got on staff, they are the subject matter experts with recruiting. So
Awesome.
hit us up, hit me up. I'm easy to find. You can send me a direct message, send me an email, cpf@battlebuddies.usa.com. Easiest way to do it. And we can have a conversation. So
Cool.
I appreciate you having me on, Sebastian.
Yeah, man, this has been great, and it's brought some insight to me and clarified some feelings that I have about employment, and especially in the veteran community. Appreciate your time. For those watching and listening, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit up Battle Buddies USA, hit that like button on them too. Thanks for your time, folks.